Hey friends, I'm Coach Marsha. I'm hopping on today for a little segment I'm going to call Coffee with the Coach because it's coming up on Boston Marathon season, and I'm a 3-time Boston Marathon qualifier, and I've been coaching for over 12 years now. I thought I would hop on and share some of my tips and tricks for running that course. So let's get started. The first thing, you probably already know this, it's a net downhill course. Don't let that fool you into thinking it's easy because gravity's in your favor. Doing anything for any length of time, let alone a marathon, even downhill, it's going to beat up your quads. So you really need to train not only for the hills, because the Boston Marathon course is notoriously known for heartbreak, and those Newton hills that are toward the back of the course, they start at mile 19 through 23. So not only do you need to train hills when you're tired, it's my first tip, but not only are you training to run uphill, you are training to run downhill efficiently and with endurance as well, because both of those activities, if you're not trained for, they are going to tear up your legs and they're a recipe for injury. So personally, Boston is one of the most difficult race courses I've run, despite doing all that I could for training as best as I could. Let it be known, I am a flatlander. I live in the Chicago area, so hills are pretty rare. It's not like I can go out and train on Boston caliber hills. I needed to be very intentional about that training. So if you're a flatlander like I am, definitely seek out hills, practice your uphill running technique as well as your downhill. That's the secret. If you can run downhill well, it's really going to serve you. And I'm also going to do some videos about proper training for a net downhill course, such as Boston, as well as I'm going to give you a strength circuit that you can train your muscles, your uphill and downhill muscles. So that's going to help you immensely as well. So let's get back to the course. You know it's net downhill. We know to train for downhill. Boston's tough because it comes at a very rough time of the season. You need to start training kind of right after the holidays, late December, January, because it's an April race. So for a lot of us, the conditions aren't good. Here we've got winter. It's really hard to get out and bang out a 20-miler when there's snow and ice and such. One of my Boston Marathon training cycles, it was my longest long run. It was a 22-miler, and we had like 8 inches of snow with freezing rain on the top. Well, I had to drive myself to the YMCA, kind of slide there in the car, and do that 22-miler on, I actually did it on a few different treadmills because I kept changing every 6 miles. What was nice is they also had a treadmill that did downhill, so I could run decline, which is a wonderful tool. If you can find, my personal home treadmill does not have that feature, but if you can find it, or if you have a treadmill that does decline, awesome, use it and train on it. So yeah, Boston's tough because the course is tough and backloaded with hills, and then you're running downhill, which is not easy. And it's a bad time of year. So it's a point-to-point course. They're going to bus you out to Hopkinton, and you're going to run it in to Boston. Wonderful. There's not a lot of turns. You don't have to worry too much about tangents. What I would say with getting there in the morning, they're going to tell you like a goal time to board your bus so they can bus you out to the starting line. This is just my personal preference. Don't go earlier than they tell you to, and maybe even go a little later. That's what I did, because the last thing I really wanted to do is be stuck in Hopkinton and have to stand around and wait. It's often cold. The ground can be wet, muddy, soggy, where you don't really want to sit down. You'll see runners bring all sorts of mats and cushions and all sorts of blankets, and they kind of spend the morning laying there. I just didn't want to do that. So what I did was I caught a tad bit later. I mean, do this at your own risk, I understand. So I got there, got in line for the potties, and headed to the line. There was no waiting around. It was better for me mentally just to get there, do your business, and go. So consider that option for yourself. I mean, of course, there's a risk. You don't want to get there too late. But I think it beats laying around or standing around just waiting. It's just not good mentally or physically. So that is a tip for one of the tip for race morning. The other one is control your fluid intake because that bus ride is kind of long. And so many people on there, I mean, you really have to go after, I don't know, if it's quite a long bus ride. I forget how long it is, but it's kind of like as marathoners, we're all so hydrated and we're anxious. So just be careful with how much you're hydrating because you won't have a chance to get off until you are there in Hopkinton. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Another tip I'm going to give you as far as running the race, this is kind of a mental thing. You'll come toward that Wellesley Scream Tunnel, which is fantastic. And you'll hear it when you're approaching, you'll hear it in the distance. It's so great, so iconic. But mentally, I like to shift my mental, because that's about the halfway, maybe 12-mile point of the race. In my head, I like to think of it as something earlier on. I like to think of reaching the foot of the Newton Hills, which is mile 19. In my head, I like to convince myself that that's the halfway point of the race. I mean, 19 is kind of where the race gets hard because the hills start. And you think 19 is close to the end of the race. Well, if you mentally shift, where I think of Wellesley as like mile 8 and the Newton Hills, which are 19, as mile 13, it helped me mentally finish the race, because if you feel like you're at the end of the race and then it keeps coming and coming and coming, because those Newton Hills will just wear on you. And when you're not going up, you're going down. And when you finish those hills and it's like you're at Brookline and you're all downhill, those quads are going to burn. So if you could, I know it sounds crazy, but if you can do that mental shift in your mind where you think of, oh, I'm at the Newton Hills at 19, just think of that as halfway, because you got a lot of work ahead of you. The race gets really hard. So I want you to mentally get your head around that. So that's, well, I guess one more tip I wanted to say, I don't expect my Boston qualifying friends to have a hard time with course time limits. However, I know that those of you who are charity runners may not be as fast. I do want to say, I know some charity runners who are working for their Abbott 6-star, the World Marathon Majors. And as a 6-star finisher, I can tell you that the Boston course limit is 6 hours. Now, if that's in your wheelhouse, that's awesome. But I do want to make sure you know that if you're going for that 6-star, you have to do it. I mean, the course will remain open. They will let you finish. They will give you a medal, but it won't be considered a 6-star finish unless you can do it underneath that you got to go under the 6-hour limit. So by all means, take your training very seriously. Do the work, because there's really nothing worse than putting all this effort into going to Boston and getting there, running the race, and all of a sudden you're at 6 hours, 20 minutes and the clock is turned off and you don't have a finish time and you don't get a star. That is like the ultimate buzzkill. So by all means, do the work and honor that course time limit, because while they'll recognize you with a medal and a finish, the Abbott World Marathon Majors do not recognize that as a finish. Other than that, like any major race, the Expo is very crowded. Go at an off time if possible, as early in the week as you can, as earlier in the day as you can. Write down what you want to see, because when you get in, it's such a crush of people that you'll forget. It'll be like a mind erase. You'll forget what you even came for. Also, if you want a jacket, I've got my little half zip on here today, my very vintage half zip. Do your best to try to order that stuff in advance online, because the lines at the Expo are just crazy. They run out of things. So if you can find it at Running Warehouse or wherever, buy it ahead of time and just avoid that whole needing to get at the Expo, because I would hate for you to be disappointed and not get what you wanted. I think that's all I've got. Again, I'm gonna do a little talk about training for net downhill, and I'm gonna give you a strength circuit, so watch out for those. Other than that, soak it in. It is fantastic. Bring a cheering section or pretend everyone's cheering for you, because they are. The Boston people are wonderful, supportive people. They will treat you like royalty, which you are. Have so much fun with it. Enjoy. And I can't wait to hear all about it. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them down in the description there, down in the comments, and I will be happy to answer them. Good luck and have fun.